anytime that a creator who's writing sci-fi or fantasy has all the imagination to come up with all this, this broad fantastical world and all these different laws and rules, but then they're like, well, the black characters, clearly they came from a history of slavery. It's like, man, come on. Like, you could have thought of more than that. So there was a scene in the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones where Daenerys Targaryen, Khaleesi, was like floating like Jesus on just a sea of black and black and brown bodies.
Why did you decide to make that the title for your book?
That is probably my favorite thing about the book is the title. Like, if I wrote 255 pages of pure shit, I would have been like, at least that title's fire. Like, I would have been content with the title because it serves two purposes for me. It's an inside joke for people who grew up as black kids and recognized that Piccolo is black, or that there are racial coded characters that they grew up watching and recognized as representation of themselves. So that's one thing where it's like a nod to everyone who did watch anime growing up and they were black and they're like, oh yeah, Piccolo is black. That's obvious. Like, oh yeah, they wrote a book about this. Oh, like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So it really works as an inside joke or inside reference for those people. And for those people who didn't grow up recognizing that there are racially coded characters. If I have a white reader who has no idea who Piccolo is and why he would be black, then it serves as a launching point for that conversation of racial coding in animation, racial coding when there is a scarcity of representation in media, and what that means for kids in general and what that meant for me as an individual who they can connect with. So it's a nod to those people who get it, and it's a conversation starter for those people who don't get it. And it serves both of those purposes really well and captures as broad an audience as possible. Like, one of the challenges I had in writing the book was narrowing in on my audience. Like, who am I writing this for? I don't want to talk down to people who did grow up playing video games and watching cartoons and reading comics and all that stuff. I wanted to be able to meet them on a certain level, but also I had to realize that a lot of readers are people who didn't grow up on those things, and nerd culture is fairly niche, or at least it was fairly niche, and all those things weren't accessible to people. So how do I meet them where they're at too? And the title hopefully is able to serve both of those purposes.
Right, do those two things. No, I love that. That, like, you were literally writing and you're like, that's fire. I gotta ask then, as someone who, again, because Piccolo is Dragon Ball Z, right? And,
yes.
I mean, I know about Goku, Kamehameha, and that's
Wave,
Vegeta, and that's you can already tell that I'm not an expert. Like, that's about it. And I saw it on like Cartoon Network every now and then. But what are the obvious things that you see with Piccolo and you're like, oh, that's a black coded character?
Yeah. So I wrote in the book early on, the first part of the book, an explanation of what makes a black coded character. And there's a few prominent things that stand out. Usually one of the main themes, and this applies to Piccolo, but a lot of characters beyond him, is that it's a character who is in a fish out of water scenario. So Piccolo comes from this other planet, Namek. He comes from this other planet, and he's on Earth now with these people who are different from them. And when you're that fish out of water character, you have a choice of either assimilation, like you're like, I'm going to try to blend in as well as I can, or you have the choice of holding on to your culture and having pride in who you are and being being you despite the world around you. And that was the type of character who I admired most. That was the type of black-coded character I loved. Whether they're black-coded or they're actually black characters, one of the movies that I mentioned in the book, which isn't a nerd reference so much and isn't animated, is the movie Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Morgan Freeman.
Okay.
Morgan Freeman is in this movie, and he is this black character who's sort of from at first blush, he looks like Robin Hood's sidekick, but that character ends up being so much more than just the black sidekick. He's someone who is smarter than Robin Hood, more capable, and who, despite being the only black person surrounded by Robin Hood and his merry men and Lil Jon and all them, he stays exactly who he is and holds on to that sense of pride. And Piccolo is like one of those characters that does that. Dinobot from Beast Wars. Like, there's so many different characters who are that character who find themselves as a minority in a larger culture, and instead of assimilating to that culture, says, nah, fuck that. Like, this is who I am. I'm going to stand on how I was raised and my value and my ethics, and navigates the world accordingly. And when I was coming up and watching shows like Transformers Beast Wars, or watching Morgan Freeman's Azim character on Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, or watching Dragon Ball Z and seeing characters like Piccolo, around that age is when I was going from a predominantly black city to going to school in a predominantly white school and having to navigate that similar experience. And the characters who I admired were the ones who stood strong within themselves. And maybe part of the reason that I admired them so much is because it's really hard to do in real life. Like, if you ever been the only black dude in a room surrounded by a bunch of white people, like, it's an experience where you want to be very firm in who you are and your culture and your values and what you think is funny and what you think is great and what your hobbies and interests are. But many of us, especially myself at that age when I was, 12, 13, you start to compromise yourself. You start to laugh at things that you don't think are funny. You start trying to talk different. You start trying to listen to different music. You start compromising yourself. And whenever I got to watch those characters who wouldn't compromise themselves, like, that would give me a little bit more strength to be more myself in this area.
Jordan, damn it, you are you are making me a little emotional right now, and I'm gonna let you know why. Because Jesus, as I was hearing you talk, I was like, oh my Lord, is he talking about me? Has he been spying on me? Because I'm Ghanaian American. My parents are from Ghana and West Africa, and they moved. And I don't know why why we do this. We could have gone to some warm place. Maybe, Florida is fucked for a whole bunch of reasons.
Yep.
But whatever. Maybe Miami. Maybe Texas, New Orleans, L.A., something. But no. My papa was like, yeah, let's go to the coldest place in America, Wisconsin. Madison, motherfucking Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah, man.
And and you're from Detroit.
I'm from the Midwest.
Right,
I am familiar.
So you understand Ghana is literally right on the equator, like the heat. And then he's like, yeah, let's bring ourselves. So hearing this and you talking about, especially that fish out of water, feeling and having to compromise and maybe morph in order to really protect oneself.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I had to do that. As someone with a Ghanaian name, an accent, because I went to Ghana when I was 7 and then came back when I was 10. So all of a sudden, I'm in this very foreign and, literally and metaphorically cold place, right? And there were things that I had to maybe do in order to either not be seen and then be seen. And, of course, in middle school and high school, or really middle school, elementary school, those are some of the most judgmental where
exactly
you don't want to stand out. Who are you standing out to?
You don't. Exactly.
So what you're saying, and now I'm like, damn, I wish I watched Dragon Ball Z because I would have been like Piccolo. I get it. But what were other shows? Because I know you mentioned Transformers and some other ones. What were some other shows that had that same kind of moments for you?
There were so many. You get really good, or at least I got really good around that age at identifying the black-coded characters and seeing whether they're the type of character that I would want to emulate or not. There are certain ones that were the opposite of the kind that I mentioned. So I mentioned like the honorable ones, you know, Martian Manhunter, Piccolo,
didn't
Dinobot.
he change into a black person? Right.
Oh,
John,
yeah,
John,
yeah, yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So, okay.
Yep,
John, hey, my name John.
John. Yeah. We're going to make it real clear.
Josh Logan said, here we go, John.
Yeah. He was one. He's like, yeah, another one. I come from another planet.
Right.
I'm in this fish out of water scenario. And they like, let's clearly make him, this is the experience of a black man. Like
right.
they made the analogy very, very clear. Then there were other characters who were black coded who were more a token or were just there as the quirky, funny support to the white main character. All these characters weren't necessarily bad, but they weren't inspiring by any means. So I think of if you ever watched Doug, Skeeter's best friend Doug was a black-coded character. He was technically blue. He was sort of drawn bluish, purplish, but he was clearly the black best friend. You would always see him beatboxing or DJing or like doing that type of thing, and you're just like, oh yeah, they're clearly meaning him as the black best friend. Like that's obvious. There are other scenarios where later on, when shows in the 90s started removing themselves from the early racism of like 60s and 70s animation and started trying to add diversity, they usually had a formula that many of us got used to seeing, which is usually the ratio was 1-4 or 1-5. The most obvious or example that can resonate with most people is Power Rangers. There was the Black Ranger. There would always be, in those type of teenage shows, there would be one Asian character sometimes and one black character.
And there can only be one.
There can only be one. Yeah, two, that's too many. Yeah, right. This was a transition where it was like before we used to just have nothing but white characters. Now we're like, we're you know, this is the 90s. We're progressive.
That's right.
Throw in one black character, and we're gonna have him shuck and jive every chance we get. Like he gonna be dancing. Exactly. He biting putties and he belly rolling. He's like, what? It's like, all right, Zach, damn. I think we really need to do this.
Oh wow.
But
yes.
There would be that type of character, which like, oh, you're expected to have that be your favorite character, but really I feel like most black people would look at the one token black character and see it for what it is.
Right.
Like, this is tokenism. This isn't going to be my favorite character.
Right.
So yeah, there were different types of portrayals of the black character, but the problem, big picture wise, is that diversity was so bad when we were growing up that we didn't have much representation to hold on to. Like we didn't have, so whenever I did see a character who I admired, who navigated the world in a way that I found inspiring, being that person who was outside of their own culture, but still managing to stay strong in who they were, that was so inspiring to a kid like me. So I loved those characters. I latched onto them so much.
Wow. So, I mean, Given those reasons of, you know, and those observations that you made about these different characters and things like that, what was the place that you found yourself, or what medium did you find yourself retreating to the most? Was it like TV, aka cartoons, comics, movies, or because you've kind of mentioned all three, you know?
Right. It was all of the above. I think the thing that I watched the most was the thing that was most accessible to me, which was TV. So my brother and I, we would often go to Blockbuster Video or Movie Mania, and we would go get movies every week.
Wow.
Yeah. Pour out some for Blockbuster. We would go there and get movies. So we did get to watch movies on weekends. Video games, it would really depend on when we had access to the Sega Genesis. Like, my parents were divorced at a young age, or when I was young. And my dad had all the video games. So whenever we would go to dad's place on weekends, that's when we would get to play video games. Comics were and are still an expensive hobby. So it wasn't like I could have comics whenever I wanted to because I was raised pretty poor. We would go to the bookstore, and whenever we had access to the bookstore, we would read the comics there. But, you know, when you're a kid, you're not dropping $4 or $5 on too many comics.
Of course.
So the thing that I had the most exposure to, or the most access to, was TV. And I would wake up ridiculously early in the morning to watch 6 a.m. cartoons. Pokemon came on early in the morning. Sailor Moon came on early in the morning. Mighty Max, and then obscure cartoons. James Bond Jr., like Biker Mice. There are certain shows that would come on.
James Bond Jr.
There was a James Bond Jr. Yeah, I don't know, the theme song and everything. That was wild.
What? Wait, was it James
Look
Bond?
it up, yo. If you listen to this podcast right now, look up James Bond Jr. Yeah.
So he was basically James Bond's kid or something?
He was James Bond's nephew, I think, is what they made him as. And it was this
Uncle JB being on that crazy stuff. Okay, got it.
Exactly. All right. So early morning, I would watch these cartoons and then go to school. First thing you do when you come back from school, especially in those times between, if you had working parents like I did, like I would get home from school 3-something in the afternoon, and the hours between 3 to 5 is when there were cartoons on. I would watch those cartoons, and then the sitcoms would come on from 5 to 6. So it'd be Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Family Matters, all that stuff. And then Simpsons would come on after that. Like I had this whole repertoire of TV shows that I would watch because my mom was busy. She was a nurse. She was working. She was in school. Like if you grew up with a certain lack of supervision or amount of autonomy,
that's right,
you end up sitting in front of the TV a lot. And if you're a kid like me who falls in love with this stuff, then you end up spending a lot of time with the TV showing you and telling you what is expected of you and who you are. And for better or worse, TV raised a great many of us. And I am of the opinion that that's not all bad. There's some negative messages there for sure, but I think one of the skills that is sort of a underappreciated, unsung talent that many of us developed was a way of media literacy where we recognized those messages from characters that made us feel good about ourselves. And we latched on to those characters.
Right.
And the characters that made us feel bad about ourselves, we ignored them. We filtered them out. We pretended like they didn't exist.
That's right.
There are characters, there are so many things in like racist Disney movies that I and most people just sort of ignore in order to enjoy the thing that they want to enjoy.
Like, I don't even see you.
Yeah, like I'm just gonna filter that out. Same with anime. You didn't grow up watching anime, but anime has so many racist depictions of black people.
Oh boy.
Like, and you just get used to like, ooh, I'm just gonna ignore. Like, there's one Pokemon named Jinx. Like, I'm just not gonna look at that one. There's a moment in The Little Mermaid during Under the Sea when Sebastian is going through all the fish. The noose play the flute, the carp play the harp, the place play the bass, and they sound in sharp. He's going through all the fish, and he's like the black fish he sings, and they show this black fish, just like this very stereotypical looking black singer. You just brain dump that. Dragon Ball Z has Mr. Popo. They have these like depictions of the dark-skinned black character with like circle lips. And
that kind of
you're like, I'm not gonna focus on that. I'm gonna focus on Piccolo,
and even
I'm gonna focus on Sebastian, or I'm gonna focus on this thing that actually makes me feel good about myself.
And even at that young age, you were able to decipher and kind of just make that distinction.
That's a skill that black kids in general, or maybe people in color more broadly, learned to do when there wasn't that much representation. Meanwhile, white people were learning like, everyone's the same, or don't pay attention to race. And we were learning like how to find ourselves. White people had the luxury of being able to say, let's not pay attention to race. They were surrounded by white people. They had plenty of choices of favorite characters and things to inform the type of person that they can become, the type of people they could be. They could be, action stars, doctors, whatever. They had many, many choices in the type of character that they wanted to latch on to. We had a smaller number of characters. So we got really good at finding as many of them as we could and saying, oh, that character can represent me. Even if it's not necessarily that's where black coding comes from. It doesn't have to be an actual black character. It doesn't have to be Martian Manhunter turning into a black character for us to say, oh yeah, that's black. Cool.
Like when we saw him with the green and the red eyes and him, then John, we were like, oh,
we
already know what's up.
It could be like that blatant, or it could be something like Max from a Goofy movie where we're like, oh yeah, that's a black code. We're gonna claim that.
Yeah.
It could be like something that's anthropomorphized that we're like, it could be a blue character or a green character or whatever, and we're like, or animals where, in Transformers Beast Wars, they're all animals. They're not humans. They're machines that turned into animals. But we could look at Optimus Primal, or we could look at Dinobot, and we'd be like, oh, yeah. That's like this.
Or I even think of there's that controversy about the Transformers movie where they had one of they kind of had like grills in a way, or like you know what I'm talking about, right?
So they did that quite a few times, but you're thinking of Jazz. When they did Jazz, they were shucking and jiving. These two Amos and Andy bots were going.
I was like, what the fuck is this?
There are so many bad depictions like that too. And those are the ones where we're just like, that's fucked up, but we're gonna
movement, Man, that's and I feel like what's the name of that Kendrick Lamar breakfast and cereal, or was it where he's just talking about being raised in front of the TV and having that? And in a way, cartoons they do have a moral code. Like there is always that like arc where they learn something and then and as a kid, of course, you're
absorbing all of that,
right? Especially as you're seeing that character that you relate to, and you're like, oh, I can live and move in that certain way.
I think as a society, we largely underestimate and misunderstand just how much media plays a role in young kids forming their identities.
Wow. And do you see that? And I guess, and if we're bringing it to the present day, and you as an adult and having the vocabulary and able to see these things, what is the state, or how does that media? How are you looking at it now? Like, do you see a change, or is
so
it better?
much better?
It's so much better. Okay.
It is so much better now. Still a ways to go, and I'll explain what the ideal future is. But representation is so much broader now. There's so much more to watch. All of us, if you are a TV fan, have dealt with the crisis now, which is a very modern crisis, of just having so much TV that you don't even know what to watch. There are so many streaming services and so many options that you can just scroll Netflix for hours trying to decide what to watch that evening. When it comes to kids' entertainment, there's a lot more diversity. There are a lot more Black characters. There are a lot more options for kids to be able to latch on to different things. And most importantly, and this is talking about what I hope to continue in the future, is that there's more opportunity for Black writers. There's more opportunity for diversity behind the screen, behind the camera, in the writer's room.
That's right.
And so long as that happens, that is what gives thoughtful representation and more genuine, thoughtful, positive stories for the audience to be able to latch on to. So you have, cartoons now like Craig of the Creek. That is absolutely amazing. This Cartoon Network show about this little Black kid and his friends on the playground going on adventures. So it's a lot better now for sure than when I was growing up. And to the extent that people like me and you and anyone who is creatively minded wants to get into entertainment and write these stories, the better our kids will be, the better, my inner child will feel about making this powerful force that helped mold me more, better for the next kids coming up.
Right. So, I guess going from that, why did you feel then, not just because of you, because obviously as a writer, you probably had this, book, kind of gestating around, but why did you feel like it was necessary for this book to be out there? Because you're talking about one component of it, right? And seeing childhood and how, cartoons and media has influenced you. But why else did you feel like this book needed to, because also is a memoir of race and
religion and pop culture,
right? Exactly. So obviously it dealt with other stuff. So why did you feel like this book needed to be out there and for people to see?
Funny enough, you unintentionally answered this question about 15 minutes ago when you were describing how you were listening to my experience in a predominantly white space as a Black kid and having to compromise and navigate it and breaking off little pieces of yourself. Like that resonated with you in some way because you had a similar experience.
That's right.
my favorite thing about writing, and the thing that motivated me to write this book and to talk about a lot of the things that were painful or vulnerable or whatever, any negative emotion that I might have been dealing with while I was writing it and going back to that time in my life, the thing that I latched on to is the fact that writing something helps both me and the reader in very profound ways. For me, it makes me feel less lonely knowing that I have this experience, and that if I'm brave enough to put it out there, I'm going to find out that I'm not as rare as I think. And that's true with everyone. We all think that we have this like terrible, unique experience, but it's only when you don't talk about it that it really closes in on you and makes you feel like you're this weirdo, or that your experience is particularly painful and it's your cross to bear and you're going to have to do it alone. When you learn to talk about it and explain yourself and what your experience is like and how you felt, then you start finding that so many people had similar experiences. It might not be exactly the same. It might not be a one-to-one comparison, but it's like, oh yeah, I know what that emotion is like. I know what that feels like. And the highest compliment I could ever get as a writer, whenever it happens, I'm just thrilled and honored, is when if to the extent I am able to put to words an emotion that someone else can feel, and they could say like, oh yeah, that explains how I felt. You put it in a way that I was not able to think about. It's sort of the same feeling if you ever listen to a song that like touches you in some way in your heart and you're just like, oh yeah, like it gets me. Like I love that feeling of being able to, if ever I've done it before, like write something in a way or explain a personal experience where someone's like, oh yeah, I had that similar experience and I knew what that felt like. And that's exactly like you described it. That was it right there. So it's good for me to be able to share that and to feel less alone in that experience. And it's good for the reader because they get something that explains their experience in a way that they might not have had the language or the time or thought to be able to understand about themselves. Wow. So the whole thing is about understanding ourselves better, understanding each other better, and feeling less lonely in those experiences so that we can hopefully heal from them and grow from them. And so that was why I wanted to write the book. And when I decided to write the book, I decided that my North Star would just be being very raw and honest about all the things that happened in my life. And in doing that, I would, hopefully make it okay for other people to acknowledge the similar things that would have happened in their life, and for them to have a thing to point at or a story to point at to say like, oh, I experienced that thing and I know how it felt and I am not alone in it.
It was very interesting when you said something about music and like, you know, how you connect with music. And I always remember this quote where someone said, we don't mourn musicians from what we knew about them, but what they taught us about ourselves.
Yeah.
And I feel like in a way, that's almost kind of what you were looking for with that book, right, where you wanted that ultimate connection with the reader to look at something that is unique and is the life story of Jordan Calhoun, but for someone to be like, oh my God, I literally went through that same thing.
Exactly.
And I think that's so amazing and powerful. So, I mean, this book is out and, you know, you're out doing the book tour and things like that. What were some, and, you know, hey, again, as I said, there's a difference between stalking and research. So, you know, did a little bit of research on you. And I'm seeing you, you know, meeting Mohammer, who's you know, I love that comedian. The king himself, LeVar Burton, you know, reading Rainbow. So what were some, you know, fun moments on the book tour, or you just going around? And what were some reactions that you got from people reading the book and talking to you about it? And what you know, really pleased you or surprised you? Yeah.
I'd say both pleased and surprised would be when people tell me stories from my... So this is my first memoir, my first time writing something like this. And the way that I mean, my publisher wouldn't want to hear this, but the way that I wrote certain parts of it, if it was a particularly traumatic thing, like I wrote it, but I didn't keep revisiting it to edit it over and over again. Like no matter through the rounds of editings, there are certain things where I was just like, an editor can take it. Like I can't, I'm not trying to revisit this thing. And I wasn't used to certain, not even certain people. I wasn't used to anyone really knowing the intimacies of my life. And so when the book came out, I really had to get used to people bringing up stories from my past where my reaction would just be like, how do you know? Like what?
Sir?
Like that was in the book. Like what? I forgot that was even in there.
Right.
I forgot that I wrote this story. Like, how do you know this? Because I spent so much time. I mean, there was a stretch of time between when there was a stretch of time from when I left the United States to join the Peace Corps up through about some years after grad school when I moved to New York. There was a stretch of time where I did not talk about childhood. I didn't talk about how I was raised extremely religious. I didn't talk about having to move from an all-black school to an all-white school. I just didn't talk about I didn't talk about going to a Christian boarding school. I didn't talk about that time of my life, period, to friends at all. So when the book came out and people actually got to read about things that I had never spoken about before, even people who know me very, very well, like I just got used to not talking about that time in my life with them or with anyone. And so when they would read this stuff and have this better understanding of me and ask me questions based on those things in my life that I had spent so long trying to hide or avoid, that would just catch me off guard. And so it would be surprising, but then it would also be very, what word should I use? I don't want to say healing, but it was very, it was almost therapeutic. It was exposure therapy to be able to have the types of, like, I'm very comfortable having this conversation with you right now because I've had so much practice in having this conversation just in the past few years.
Right.
Whereas previous to this experience, I never talked about this stuff. I never talked about how much TV I watched and how that raised me. I never talked about the experience of having to move to a predominantly white space or black space to a predominantly white space. I never talked about sex publicly. I never talked about like any of these things until I wrote this book and forced myself to then talk about it. So whenever I'm talking to strangers now, or if ever I'm at a book event and someone's like, what about this time that you XYZ from the book? I'm just like, oh, now I have the vocabulary to talk about this. And now I have a level of comfort in talking about this that I would have never expected to have if not for writing this book. So the experience that both surprises me and makes me really happy on a very personal level is knowing that I can have these conversations now and that they're meaningful to those who had similar experiences. And the other thing, on a very different note, is just finding other nerds who are passionate about the same shit that I was passionate about.
Right.
Like, that's the best part of being a nerd or being passionate. And I say nerd, when I say nerd, I mean it very broadly. I think you could be a nerd with virtually anything. You could be a sneaker nerd. You could be a comic book nerd. You could be a nerd for Broadway. You could be a nerd in a lot of things. It's just being passionate about something so much that you want to share it with other people. That's my personal definition of a nerd. Like, you really want to be like, oh, you haven't seen this anime? Oh, I want you to see this because I think you would really like it. Let me share it with you.
Yes.
That is, for me, being a nerd. And having all of my sort of childhood nerddoms spilled on a page, and for people to read them and be like, oh, you watched this obscure you watched James Bond Jr.
JBJ.
Captain Bucky O'Hare or King Arthur and the Knights of Justice.
That's
or Macron 1 or Robotech or whatever, and to be like, oh, you like that too?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was the only one. And to be able to share that experience and to talk about it, like, that has been so much fun in having these conversations, just finding those areas where you connect with someone on a piece of pop culture, a movie, a TV show, a book, whatever, video game, and to be able to share that experience with someone that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to.
That's awesome. And, hearing that and just hearing you speak of it in a very, where you might have had some kind of catharsis, right? Or some kind of,
it was very
that feeling. But when I look at, because I see the other thing that you do, because you're a multi-talented guy, is that you are the editor-in-chief at Lifehacker, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a writer myself, and as someone who has seen the digital journalism landscape, it gives me pause. It makes
as it should. That's a very reasonable reaction.
And there's a little. There was definitely the teardrop
slowly going down the cheek.
You know what I'm saying? Like just pour a little something for it.
Mm-hmm.
So as someone who is quite literally an editor in chief of Lifehacker, which shares all this time with the Rude and Jezebel and all those other sites, talk to me about just not even the journey, but how the state of digital journalism now, and like what you see, how you can, what factors led to where it is now, and maybe the future of it, or what you're.
Oh man, that is a great question, but it's also really complicated. Okay, well, how I got here, I can summarize that by how can I summarize this? A combination of just doing a bunch of shit and then luck. like if I were to give advice to anyone who wanted to get into writing, this is probably applicable across most any creative industry.
Right.
Even if it's something like software engineering or whatever, the way that you can get your foot into the door is by doing it over and over again and building a portfolio of work. I think that's usually one of the hardest things to do, and probably not coincidentally one of the things that most people don't want to do. They'll research their asses off, they'll read about it, they'll network, they'll do all these things besides doing the actual thing that they want to do.
Right.
So in my case, that thing being writing, I started writing for a site called Black Nerd Problems in 2015, I believe it was. I had this idea early on in the Game of Thrones days, before it was the phenomenon that it became, but it was like in the first season of Game of Thrones.
Fair.
I had written this article called Why Am I the Only Black Kid in Westeros, basically talking about the lack of diversity in Westeros. And
by the way, real quick, who's a black coded character in Game of Thrones?
There is Grey Worm was the only black character
with
in the first season.
The Unsullied.
Okay, the Unsullied. And then there was Missandei, who became his partner.
Right.
Who was another slave.
Right. So, I mean, goddamn. As you're saying it, I'm just like, Jesus.
Yeah. So the black characters were the slave characters. And one of the things that hung me up on this was like, this is a fictional land. This is the Seven Kingdoms. There's fucking dragons.
Right.
Like there's anytime that a creator who's writing sci-fi or fantasy has all the imagination to come up with all this, this broad fantastical world and all these different laws and rules.
Man,
but then they're like, well, the black characters, clearly they came from a history of slavery. It's like, man, come on. Like you could have thought of more than that. So there was a scene in the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones where Daenerys Targaryen, Khaleesi, was like floating like Jesus on just a sea of black and black and brown bodies, and Grey Worm was the leader of those Unsullied, and I was just like, this is such poor representation. There was only one other black character. I can't remember his name, but he was a smuggler. He was the only other dark skinned character.
Actually, you know what? Also, I think because at one point Daenerys like traps them in a cellar. Do you or like traps because he was a slave owner, maybe, or he was part of the elite, and he was with that other woman that tried to betray Daenerys, and then they lock him in the cavern or something like that. And I can't remember his name, but he's a big guy. But I think actually he might be half Ghanaian or something. But anyway,
I think we're thinking of the same character.
Oh, the same. Okay,
I think we're thinking of the same character. He was a smuggler. He was one of the more powerful characters.
Yeah.
But the representation was not great. So I wrote about that early on. I didn't know where I was going to publish it. I didn't know anything about writing. Like, I knew nothing about nothing at that point. I just wanted to learn. And so I wrote that and submitted it. Long story short, it was published on a site called Black Nerd Problems, which is absolutely great, founded by Will Evans and Omar Holman. It's still running today. Highly recommend to anyone who's listening to this. And it was published there. And then I started writing a little bit more and a little bit more and publishing it on Black Nerd Problems. And eventually what happens is once you get enough bylines, once you have some portfolio, you can get a slightly larger byline, until fast forward, I was writing something for The Atlantic, and I was writing something for Men's Health, and I was writing something for a lot of different outlets. And that is ultimately how I lucked into a combination of luck and work. I don't want to sell the work. I don't want to sell the work.
Brush your dirt off the shoulder a little bit. I mean, you put in the work.
I just never want to underestimate the value of just luck. Like being in the right place at the right time. Of course, like that. There's that old, saying that. It's luck is timing meets preparation or whatever. Like, opportunity. Yeah, exactly. Like you do have to do the work. Yes. You do have to do the work. You have to build a portfolio. You have to do the thing that you ultimately want to do so that when someone says, hey, here's an opportunity, can I see your work? Or, whatever, they'll stumble across it. You'll be able to show them something. So many of the opportunities that I got in writing came from someone stumbling across something that I really didn't expect people to read. Like, I have so many stories. I won't waste our time with them, but I have so many stories of times that I wrote something expecting it to not be very popular. I wrote this article. The first viral article that I wrote was about how a Goofy movie is the blackest Disney movie of all time, and that went viral. Like Huffington Post picked it up. It went viral on Black Nerd Problems. It became this very, very popular thing that people were able to latch onto and say like, oh yeah, I love this movie, and I saw the same type of coding that you saw.
That's right.
And that was something that I wrote late at night in one night, and I was talking to my friend Omar, the one who co-founded Black Nerd Problems, and I was like, ain't nobody, this is gonna go wood, this is going plastic, nobody is gonna read this, I don't care, I just gotta get this off my chest. Yeah, exactly. This is going copper, it's gonna sell for 5 cents,
right?
And I'm just like, I just need to get this out, and it ended up going viral. There were other times that I wrote about seeing Ta-Nehisi Coates on a panel at Comic-Con, and I wrote about just what that experience was like, because there was a chaotic panel for a lot of different reasons.
Gotcha.
And come to find out later on, Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, like I was on the phone with him when he was asking me to write for The Atlantic, and we were joking around about how he had read that article years ago, and people would make fun of Ta-Nehisi Coates for it because I was making jokes about what it was like watching him on stage. And this is like, people are paying attention to your work more than you expect. Even if you think that it's, that your work is not being recognized or perceived by other people, just putting it out there is like pulling a slot machine, where like your odds on any one might not be that high, but if you're at the slot machine long enough, you only need.
So with those opportunities that you're speaking of, do you think in this, and that's I guess what I was trying to go at with the current landscape of digital journalism now, where these places are being, it just seems like there seems to be a lot more kind of quicker articles put out and listicles.
Game that changed,
right? Like, do you think that kind of is that still able to happen? Like your kind of story where, hey, you put some good stuff out, eventually someone's going to get to you, or is it now in a different place?
Yes, it's still possible upward inflection, because I think that it's the game done changed. The game done changed. So yeah, exactly. You got me.
Yeah.
So one of the main differences now, okay, so for context, I am on a certain side of the spectrum now that I work in digital media. I hire writers and freelancers when I need writers and freelancers. So I'm on one side of things, whereas I was on the opposite end before, just trying to get my foot in the door and trying to write and trying to publish. And what is different now in the past 5 to 8 to 10 years or so is digital media brands used to be the gatekeeper to audiences. And now, with the rise of social media in the past 5 to 8 to 10 years, people have direct access to audiences themselves through whatever means, through their podcast, through their YouTube channel, through their Twitch channel, through their Instagram, through their Twitter, through their threads, whatever. There are so many means through their newsletter, through their Substack. There are so many ways to connect with audiences. So now digital media, one of the reasons that, in my opinion, there are so fewer opportunities than there were coming up is that, and this might be a little bit boring getting to the finances of it, but there is less advertising money in digital media because now previously advertisers would say, if I want to reach an audience, if I want to reach a certain audience, a black millennial audience or whatever, I am going to advertise on the root. And that's where my advertising money is going to go, and the root is going to have this funding to put out all these articles and to hopefully reach the audience that they're trying to reach. When influencers and social media has grown to the extent that it has, now all of that advertising dollars, it's not all just going to digital media brands. They're also going to advertise for this influencer that has an audience of their exact same. Yeah, it's like, oh, you want to reach a nerd audience? I'm going to hire this nerd influencer. You want to reach this fitness audience? There are fitness influencers who can hawk these products for me or to advertise this thing that I want them to advertise.
They just want to go straight to the source because they've got the connection, right?
Exactly. So now the digital media industry has to compete with what might be the future of. And I think both are going to exist at the same time. It's not like digital media. It's not like traditional media and journalism is going to go extinct and, YouTubers are going to take over. But YouTubers are a much larger slice of the pie now. And it's a bad thing and a good. There are pros and cons to both of it. It's like, it's a bad thing for journalism when it comes to credible information that meets a certain standard and tries to meet a certain level of ethics and transparency. So journalists, capital J journalists, if you're writing for a brand that has a code of ethics and editorial guidelines and will hopefully care about the truth and write what's the phrase I'm looking for? Not a correction if they need to correct something that they publish wrong,
and all of that. And
right. Like that exists and that is great in a way that a random person on Twitter or X or YouTube, they'll say whatever they want. They don't have to worry about that at all. They're
out there free. They're doing what they
exactly
can do,
with no training, no ethics, no stand. Like they could just people can put out whatever they want, however they can get it, however they want to get it. Right. So that really sucks. I think that hurts everyone. That hurts society. That hurts the industry. It hurts the reader because they're just getting information that could just be absolute crap.
Yeah.
And so that's the downside of it. The good side of it, and this is how people in a lot of my peers, writers, people who've recently published books, a lot of people in publishing, like a lot of writers sort of balk at the growth of they're very frustrated. We're all very frustrated about the shrinking of publishing and journalism and those opportunities and how much we're meant to promote our books and like how hard / difficult / impossible it is to have a career in writing, to have a full-time career in writing. It's so challenging. It's so rare. There's so much hustle involved and so little payoff. So we get upset about that, but we also, to criticize myself and my peers, we also ignore that the audiences have just moved and we're just being curmudgeons who don't want to move along with it. We're very stubborn, shaking our fist at the clouds, right? Because there are audiences, audiences have shifted to video. And writers generally just don't want to be on video. I'm generalizing here, obviously. But
you doing it. You're doing it.
I'm willing to do it, but so few of us are willing to do it. So many of us are far more comfortable being on our laptop, writing, typing, writing, like doing our work that way, and not building our own personal brands. This is something that I struggle with myself, whereas I work for a digital media brand, and I have the stability of working for a company that pays me, right? But what I'm not doing, and what I probably should be doing more of, and what some people are actively doing, are building their personal brand, because there's a career in that too. When publishers are trying to find people to sign to their next book deal, it used to be that they would go, oh, this staff writer writes for this site, they have an audience, they built an audience, whatever. But in the future, I think it's going to be just as common, if not more common, for them to say, who's this person with a large TikTok following?
Right.
Who's this person with this large Twitch following? Who's this person with this large YouTube following? Like, people can build their own personal brands and their own audiences. And so long as they have an audience, that's always what the advertiser or the publisher or the people with money are going to care about. Access to that audience.
Right.
And we're very hesitant to focus on building our personal brands and having our Substacks or having our podcasts or having our YouTube channel or having our Twitch channel or building our TikTok or doing all that work, because it's a lot of work without immediate payoff. And most of us who are of a certain age or a certain level of experience don't want to do it. But younger people are doing it, and we should adjust accordingly.
So you think that's what the trend is? Because, and I like the fact that, hey, you kept it real, that a little bit of the blame is definitely on like journalists and these big, conglomerates, big companies that were willing to almost in a way sell out and, not maybe hold themselves to certain standards or something like that, and now have been overtaken by, because instead of changing with the times, they just decided to just stay in their, we are writers and we have our things to go.
And it's also, I mean, this is a challenge. I will take a very short digression to just talk about capitalism and just the state of money in journalism.
We're here for
it's
it.
like, all right, so it's also that journalism is a business, and it's something that people no longer want to pay for. Obviously, I'm generalizing here, but people, generally speaking, how many listeners who are listening to this pay for their journalism, pay for the news that they read? When a website pops up and says, like, donate money to this website to keep us afloat, how many of us actually pay it? How many of us are willing to subscribe? How many of us are willing to pay for a digital media site that they might read regularly? I'll tell you, I'm not. I don't, and I work there. Like, I'll keep it a buck with you. Like, if I'm trying to read an article that my friend sent me and I don't have a subscription to the New York Times or whatever else,
right,
I'm just gonna go around. Like, I know how to climb the fence. Like, I know how to get around
paywall,
it. Like, I know how to get around a paywall. I know how to put a ski mask on, and I'm gonna read it the ski mask way.
Right, yeah.
And I and most people are part of that problem where the good information of something that has editorial standards and guidelines and will publish a correction and is trying to have truth be their North Star and is trying to operate under some, realm of ethics and clarity and transparency, that information costs money. Bad information is free. Like, someone on YouTube can say whatever they want, and they can do it completely free, and they can have access to access to their audience directly. And so it's
but if I can, because I understand what you're saying about, like, hey, there's a little bit of personal responsibility upon the reader to subscribe for the places that you believe in, right? And I totally
I'll blame
get that.
digital media just as much.
Okay, right.
Just as much.
It's kind of like when people talk about, like, climate change and, these big oil companies are saying, hey, you didn't recycle, you didn't throw that one thing in the bin, and it's like,
and it's
hey,
like,
it's not
that personal.
That ain't
that's
all.
Not.
I'm not
that
doing
ain't
all on
anything
us.
with that. Yeah,
So,
like, these top companies are the ones who are responsible for this. Yeah. Digital media. The thing that I would point the finger at us for is that we're, if there is money. I remember having this argument with my former, the CEO of Geo Media, having conversations about Kotaku, a site that I don't write for, a site that I don't, they're a sister site. They were a sister site to Lifehacker. People who run digital media, generally, just obviously generalizing here, old white dudes who are very used to a very different type of media landscape than the one that exists today. They're even more out of touch than I am, and I'm out of touch compared to Gen Z. Exactly. So if they have this old model of how media is run, where revenue comes from, where advertising comes from, and all that, I remember having a conversation with him one time where I was just like, there's no reason why these writers shouldn't be, like, if they're gamers, they should be on Twitch. Like, why wouldn't you be on Twitch? Why wouldn't you be on YouTube? Why wouldn't you have these things where the audiences
like you want
for
to
video
have that
games are.
direct conversation, the direct connection. Why
Exactly,
not? Right.
exactly. And from his perspective, and being somewhat out of touch, he's just like, well, where does the money come from in that? And I'm like, where the fuck do you think the money? Like, people are making money off of this stuff.
Yes.
People subscribe to Twitch, like the same way you get advertisements or you get revenue from banner ads on websites because people might click them or people see them and people want to see those views. Like, those things exist. There are sponsorships that exist on social media and on Twitch and everywhere else. Like, the media companies, we have not done a very good job at competing with what will potentially threaten, if not overtake us, which is free information from YouTubers and people who just have access to their audiences by building it
just
themselves.
gonna do it, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, like, especially a place or a company that has these resources, that has money, but you're looking at whomever, Joe Schmo in Montana, whatever, and you're getting mad at him for you can. I mean, again,
don't be mad that he's doing the game better than you.
You
like,
know,
that's
don't hate the player.
Exactly. Like this is the landscape that they're operating in. They have way fewer resources, and they're still building an audience. Like, yeah, and that's, I think, when we talk about the future of journalism, I think that is a trend that I see continuing. I had this conversation with my team at Lifehacker where I think readers and audiences, I see this in myself as well, care about the people who's giving them information more than the brand that's giving them information. I care more about who the writer is or who the person is on camera rather than, oh, they're doing it for this magazine or whatever. I will follow a writer no matter what outlet they're writing for.
Right.
Whereas the brand, I might not care so much about. So the last time that I read GQ was because Hanif Abdul-Rakib wrote something about Steph Curry, and I wanted to read what Hanif was writing about. Right? Like, I don't give a shit about GQ.
Right.
Like, I could not care less.
Yeah.
But I care about this writer, so I'm going to read it there. If I'm reading something in another outlet, like if it's a writer who I care about, I'm going to read what that writer has to say. If Ta-Nehisi Coates was writing something, it could be for The Atlantic, or it could be for The New Yorker, or it could be for any one of their competitors. And
it really don't matter.
It doesn't matter because people care about this writer and their perspective more than anything else.
I mean, we read his comic, Black Panther comic, but right? Like, we're gonna read his stuff
exactly because we care about that person and that perspective. We built a relationship with that. With
and I'm guessing someone who's maybe not even that much of a comic book reader would be like, but wait, I like Ta-Nehisi Coates.
I recognize that name. I recognize that work. Like, oh, I want to see what that person has to say much more than the brand. We are now, I don't know if spoiled is the right word, but we've grown accustomed to be able to have access to the people who are giving us information now. And we like that. We like seeing the face of people on social media. We like seeing their name and knowing who they are more so than we do the brand. Like, I personally don't think anyone cares about Lifehacker as a brand compared to a writer that is writing for Lifehacker who they built a relationship with and they like that person's work. They like something that they wrote about before, or they feel connected to them in some way. They have some type of parasocial relationship where they feel that that person is their friend or whatever, and they will follow that writer more than they will follow the brand. And I think that that's something that digital media brands haven't fully recognized, and I guess we're incentivized to not recognize it. I think it's a scary threat that most people aren't willing to acknowledge.
Wow. So I got to say, you're as the editor-in-chief of Lifehack, and someone who maybe can say that they might be a little bit of an expert in the life hack or the hacking of life. What would be maybe, let's say, 3 life hacks that you use personally, or that you would maybe recommend to the people out there?
There are 2 million things. It really depends on I mean, what's interesting to you, like productivity hacks or
especially for my ass, why definitely okay, yeah, so a productivity hack and a organized hack, because I definitely need it in my chaotic life.
Productivity wise, one of my favorite pieces of advice, and this is very old advice, this is nothing new, but have you heard the phrase swallow the frog?
No, I have not.
You haven't heard Swallow the Frog?
I've definitely heard Kiss the Frog.
Okay, Swallow the Frog, I will gladly explain. Swallow the Frog is that if you have a to-do list, I live by my to-do list. I use the Reminders app on my iPhone. I usually just have an ongoing list of things I need to do any given day or any given week. Swallow the Frog means that if you have a task that is particularly daunting, do it first thing. Swallow the Frog first thing in the morning. And that will give you a big boost of momentum that will ideally steamroll through the rest of your day. Those big tasks are generally things that we put off. Even if some of them aren't even big tasks, some of them are things that we could get done in less than an hour if we just had the mental energy to do it. And it's more daunting than anything. So we put it off, and we put it off, and we put it off. Getting that stuff done, getting one thing, like choosing a thing that you've been putting off and getting that done, like planning on doing it in the morning. That is my favorite piece of productivity advice. Like, swallow the frog, get it over with.
There's some part of me, though, that is thinking that maybe way back in the day, there was that dude that where it was part of their thing to do, and they had to maybe literally swallow a frog.
Yeah, it's like if you have a task that you don't like,
this is what you need to do.
Like, just get it done.
I really don't want to swallow this tadpole.
Swallow the frog. Swallow the frog first thing. Get it over with, and then move on with your day.
And then please hit me with that organization hack.
Organization hack. Oh man, this is tricky because it's based on like what type of systems you already use. Like whether you're using Google Calendar or the Reminders app or whatever else. I will say my favorite somewhat newish feature that I use really, really regularly, and this also depends on how you manage your inbox. There are a million different ways of doing it. But my favorite feature is the snooze function on Gmail. Do you use that?
I do not. See,
man.
Jordan, I'm telling you, I'm the notes are coming right now. Yeah,
highly recommend. Yeah. Highly recommend the snooze function on Gmail. So basically, you have an email coming in. Let me. Do you have your email, your inbox open right now?
Let me look. Let me get to it. Here we go.
Okay.
Right
so
here.
You got your inbox open right now.
Yes, sir.
If you were to go to your inbox and click the box like next to an individual email.
Okay. Oh, right here.
Yep.
Yeah. Select. Okay.
And then if you were to look to the clock.
The clock. Okay, right.
Where it says snooze.
Snooze. Okay,
you can
got
click
it.
that.
Yeah.
And then it'll give you a drop-down menu that says, when do you want to snooze it until?
Until it reminds you of, okay.
And it'll go away from your inbox, and it won't come back until you have set that timer for it to, like, be back on your radar. So it's a way of filtering out the noise of your inbox. If your inbox has a lot of noise, then you can, like, try to clear it out as best you can and snooze those emails so that it'll pop back up in your inbox, and it'll come with a like specific font reminder. It'll be in orange text, and it'll say, you snooze this email for next Monday. Now, here it is on your radar. You can respond to this email.
I don't even look up. The only icon that I know up here is literally the delete. The garbage.
That's an important one. That's an important one.
Because because at some point it just gets so full, and I'm like, all right, delete. I know that one.
Two of my favorite, man. Two of my favorite. One of them is snoozing emails, so I can come back around when it's relevant, and the other one is scheduled send. Yes. Scheduled send will allow you to write emails whenever you want. You could be up in the middle of the night. You could be jet lagged across the planet. It doesn't matter. You can like write an email, schedule it to send at a certain time, and then you can archive that email and forget about it and know that it's taken care of.
You are doing the Lord's work, sir. I'm so thankful for you. So I like the next section in this is I really like doing this with my guests. It's really quite simple. It's called This or That. Just like the hip hop song, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Shout out to the 50th anniversary of hip hop. For this section, like I said, it's quite self-explanatory. You either pick this or that.
Glad to do it.
So yeah, it's just going to be a couple here. First, let's start off. Anime or Marvel?
Lately, anime.
Lately.
Okay.
Growing
up, it would have been Marvel. If you would have told me as a kid that there would be this many Marvel movies, like I would have been in disbelief. I would have been trying to I would just throw money in the air to try to pre-order it, right? Like I wanted
however you could get
bad.
It. Yes.
Now there's so many of them of varying levels of quality.
Okay.
That I'm like,
This is how we're feeling about the MCU right now.
Yeah, it's a little. I mean, everyone's gonna reach a point of exhaustion. I've basically reached mine. Like before, Marvel movies were a opening weekend thing for me, and now a Marvel movie comes. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 comes out, and I'm like, all right, if I'm free, I can see it. But if I wait a while, okay, it's fine. It's fine. So, yeah, Marvel in general, there's so much of it now that I don't get nearly excited the way that I used to. Whereas anime, I mean, there's so much anime, but so much of it is good.
It's good.
So much of it is good. This T-shirt I'm wearing right now is from a soccer anime. Look, I'm a Black American who doesn't give a shit about soccer. Until I saw this soccer anime, I was like, "Oh man, hey, he's spitting over here." Like, let me get on this. This anime is called Blue Lock. I really got into sports anime recently. There's a volleyball anime. I don't care about volleyball, but it got me going. Haikyuu is so good. Haikyuu is so good. Blue Lock is about soccer. Blue Lock is so good. There's so much good anime.
God damn, I'm missing out. I just need to.
It's really good. So I get far more excited about what the new big anime is lately than the next big Marvel movie or the next big comic book movie. Just because Marvel movies are so oversaturated and have gotten less original, whereas anime, it's also saturated. There's so much anime out there and they're incredibly long, but they still, to me, have a sense of creativity or originality or weirdness that I still feel like I'm getting something new.
I guess all I'll say is once this and actually let me just make sure to be very specific. Once these greedy ass CEOs and people that are messing around with SAG-AFTRA and WGA, because it's not, people try and blame it on the strike. Yes, there's a strike, but I
think you framed it perfectly. Yeah, it's not like, this dumb strike. It's like, no. The strike itself is necessary.
Yes.
It's the conditions that are creating
these garbage ass CEOs company, and they just need to, I think the MCU is going to come back. I can't wait for Blade. I can't wait for,
Blade, it's going to be interesting with Mahershala Ali.
Exactly. Blade's going to be fire.
That's going to be good.
I just, there's something, and we haven't even, X-Men ain't even here. I'm waiting to see what they do with Storm. I hope they let Wolverine just be okay. I
don't know if they're going to afford to. That's the thing, too, with Marvel is, and I know we keep going down these tangents.
That's
I apologize.
Yeah, no, you good.
The Marvel is too big economically for them to take many risks.
But
something like Wolverine, if it has that much name recognition and that much fandom behind it, they're gonna milk that until it's dry.
1,000%. And that's I totally get that. Actually, there's no disagreement. It's just, but there's so many great X-Men characters.
Yeah,
the way
so much
Cyclops gets done dirty.
Yep.
When they make him out to be this kind of like punk, but I'm like, dude, he's
no, they make him out to be the Boy Scout.
Yeah.
But he ain't no Boy Scout. That's the war chief right there.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm waiting for Storm. Look, and the way Black women are not represented as the superheroes was. I mean, there was this TikTok that was going around. Like they were like, hey, just name besides Storm and they were like basically Storm. Name one other Black, super, and they're just like,
you gonna get another light skinned Storm. And that's gonna be the only Black character. It's this. I think Marvel is an amazing business.
Yes.
And that is very different than being amazing art. And I think anime still has more
there's
art
still that
to it than I'm just going to be cashing this in.
And do you think that has to do with it not being... Because I feel like maybe America has tried to encroach upon anime, and basically that part of that American capitalism always feeding into Marvel and what it is. Like, do you feel like if Marvel was started out, I don't know, somewhere else than America, that it would still retain that sense of artistry?
I think the artistry still exists, just not in the form that we're talking about. I think the artistry still exists probably on the comic book level, or on the book level, but when it comes to things that bring in the money, when it comes to the MCU, when it comes to the big movies, they're not going to take many risks there. They're going to do what is tried and true to bring in.
And of course, there's still, I mean, hey, I loved Black Panther. I loved, Captain America, Winter Soldier, and things like that. Like, I think those were good movies. Yeah, but yes, I understand about.
But there will be a formula to it. I do appreciate every now and then when they do a heat check. Like they'll just try to throw out a character that by no means deserves to have their own movie, but they're like, let's just see. Let's just test the waters just to see if the audience will spend money on it. And that's how you end up with like Morbius or Kraven the Hunter because for any one of those bad movies, sometimes they'll be like, it'll be something like Venom that inexplicably got like $1 billion.
Right.
Like, so they're like, let's try some characters here and there to see if we can
there's
get
so
some
many
money
good
out of
ones
it.
still out there. Ghost Rider hasn't come in. Or like, what's going on?
Ghost Rider, they did it.
I mean, they did right. Actually, you're
awful.
absolutely right. Nicolas
Cage.
So
and bad.
I can't. Okay, we gotta move on.
So for now, when it comes to quality, anime's my choice there. Anime's my choice for now.
Mountain or beach?
I will choose mountain. I'm one of the rare people. It's an unpopular opinion.
Yeah,
I feel like 9 people out of 10 would choose beach. But you know what? I'll say this. I'll say this on the podcast. Fuck a beach. I have no interest.
Fuck a beach.
Man, listen. Okay, and when I say fuck a beach, I think specifically in the type of beach trips that I've gone on with my friends on like crowded 4th of July type holidays in New York, where you go to like Reese Beach or you go to Rockaways or whatever, and it's crowded, sand is hot,
so you gotta,
to you. It's not a good.
That's what I'm saying. You gotta
now
raise
we're talking
your
about
beach
like
level
exactly.
Up,
this is a big thing. That is a problem. That is a problem. I'm like, listen, it's hot, it's crowded. The sand is sticking to me. It's all sweaty. There's no Wi-Fi. These bugs are killing me. The seagulls will like pluck food out of my hands. Like,
you going out to Rockaways and like, hey, what are you doing here? Come on, like, come on, man. That's not gonna cut it.
That's not gonna cut it. It has not been cutting it. So if given the choice, I would choose the mountains instead because the mountains seem to be nicer for me. But if I had a choice between a nice beach, then if I'm going to I'm going to Accra,
right? There you go.
That's different.
Maybe we need to step up your beach.
My beach game is low.
You mentioned those places. I think anyone's choosing the mountain, even me. An exemplary TV season or a great movie.
An exemplary TV season or a great movie. That is incredibly difficult. I will choose an exemplary TV series. And my quick rationale for that is that an incredible TV series will give me these days 10 hours of character development and story arc and growth in the way that a movie has to try to condense into generally 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. And so you get more, or at least I get more, in watching a really well-written TV series just by nature of having more time to get to know the characters.
Got you. Well said. Double Dutch or jump rope?
Double Dutch.
So you said with the quickness.
You'll see me. That's the easy one. You'll see me twirling them things.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, man. The playground ain't never left me.
You know what? Enough said. Okay. Laptop or phone?
Laptop.
Laptop?
Yeah, I'm old.
Okay. Yeah, you just go with that. Okay. San Diego Comic-Con or New York Comic-Con?
I've never been to San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh, really?
I've never been to San Diego Comic-Con.
Okay, you know what? Because I asked that automatic, and you know what? There we go.
New York Comic-Con is where it's going to be. I've been to New York Comic-Con every year for the past God knows how many years, but I've been invited to do press at San Diego Comic-Con for years, and have just never made the trek to do it. It's on the bucket list. I should
have researched that. Okay, fair enough. That's fine. Stand-up or sketch comedy?
Sketch. Sketch.
Why?
I am a big fan of sketch comedy. I did a little bit of sketch comedy when I was in grad school with my friend Ashley. It's a ton of fun. I really like the artistry of writing. I mean, watching things like Key and Peele, like a great sketch is really good. Obviously, a good stand-up set can be good too, but just being able to watch a performance that was planned. I mean, sketch. I love sketch.
I love that. Black Cat or Catwoman?
Give me Felicia Hardy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wait, is that? Oh, okay. Because sometimes people Selena Kyle.
Listen, they're basically the same character, except Felicia Hardy is canonically thick. So So that's what I'm going with.
I was not expecting to hear that.
You've never seen a version of Felicia Hardy where she's skinny.
Talk that talk.
She is canonically
even in the animated series, the Spider-Man.
Every version. That
yes.
is part of her character's is part of her character. The thickness. So I'm taking Felicia.
That is so real. And speaking of movie characters that I need to see, when are we actually gonna? I know they said it was in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 where there was a Felicia. No, that don't count. I need to see Black Cat, and also I need to see Silver Sable on the silver screen.
The closest thing that we've gotten to that so far, I don't know if you've played any of the Spider-Man video games.
Yes.
And she was in the DLC.
Yes, one. Yeah. And it was perfect.
It was great.
Silver Sable and Black Cat.
Yep,
yes.
Exactly.
So that's, again.
The scenes where you have to chase her across Manhattan and stuff like that. Oh, man.
Lovely.
So fun. So fun.
So the fact that we have Mobius time, I'm tired of that.
Yeah.
I'm tired of that. We have Carnage, all of that. Why are we not getting one of the sexiest
Carnage movie was so bad.
That
was so bad.
Also, I'm really excited about the Spider-Man that's coming out.
October 20th. Mark the calendar.
You say it's right there?
It's right there.
Ready to go?
It's got an X on the calendar, man. So that game comes out October 20th. I'm leaving on vacation for Brazil October 22nd. And I was like, shit. I was like, can I?
Which one?
Yeah, I was like, do I not start the game till I get back from vacation?
Yes.
Or is it possible to beat it in 2 days?
I was like, let me just get to it.
Maybe I'll just take off work and dedicate 48 hours to Spider-Man, but I'm really looking forward to it.
By the way, Jordan, and I'm glad we just had this chat with Mountain versus Beach.
Uh-huh.
Now that is where you will find great beaches.
I'm looking forward to it.
You're going Rio?
I am doing a tour of the Amazon, so I will get some of that.
Yeah.
And then I'm doing Salvador.
Okay.
And
Bahia?
Rio.
Yes.
Salvador and Rio. So
trust
Bahia.
Me. You're going to come back, you'll be like, oh, Mountain. Who? Where? No, that's not going to be the case anymore.
The last great beach that I was on was in Africa. I was in Mombasa.
Oh, okay.
Mombasa in Kenya.
Yes.
Gorgeous.
Is that where you did your Peace Corps? Is that
no? Actually, I did Peace Corps in Eastern Europe. I was in a landlocked country in Macedonia.
Oh, okay. Not Africa at all.
Not Africa at all.
Got it.
So Africa, I was just there for vacation. That was a great beach. But whenever I think of the beach, and this again, I don't advocate for this. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying that this is a good thing.
Don't come for me.
This is not a good thing at all.
Yeah.
But whenever I think of the beach, I think of the Rockaways or whatever local crowded beach that it's like 50% sand, 50% garbage.
Trust me. Once you're in Brazil, it's not gonna happen.
Looking forward to it.
Lastly, before we go here, tell the people what does the future hold for Jordan Calhoun? What you working on? What are you doing? And also let them know where people can get in contact with you, or where they can follow you, and about your book, where it's released, all that good stuff.
Piccolo is Black, a memoir of race, religion, and pop culture, is available wherever you get books. I mean, the easiest, obviously, would be Amazon, but you can look on Barnes & Noble or bookshop.com or whatever, or bookshop.org. Wherever it is that you find books, find it online and cop. I really appreciate that. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you love it as much as I do. When it comes to what I am doing next, I guess this is new information. I haven't really talked about this publicly, but a friend of mine, Anissa, and myself are writing a TV show that we're going to hope to sell after the strikes are over. And so that has been scratching my creative itch for the past several weeks. We've been working on our past few months, actually. We've been writing this TV show that hopefully exists one day.
So there you go.
If ever it does exist, I'll be able to point back to this day of me making it public that this thing is. I'm putting it out there. I'm putting it out into the universe.
Snap.
So it's out there now. It's out there in the universe. This TV show that we're writing. I'm having a whole lot of fun writing it. And where people can find me is on Instagram and Threads, I guess, these days.
There you go.
Instagram is @JordanMCalhoun. Threads is also @JordanMCalhoun. Or you can go to my website, jordanmcalhoun.com. Also on Twitch. Twitch is a little bit different. My gamer tag is Paris Tokyo Ghoul. If anyone gets that reference, you are my friend. You are my comrade.
Yeah.
Paris Tokyo is a reference for the Lupe Fiasco song Paris Tokyo, and then it's mixed in with Tokyo Ghoul, which is an anime. Yo. So that's how I got my my username for my PS5, Paris Tokyo Ghoul.
Just the
sound engineer.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, he's giving the shot. Oh, okay.
Sound engineer.
I was like, I thought you were trying to tell me something.
Paris
like,
Tokyo Ghoul. Yeah, Paris Tokyo. Lupe Fiasco. Shout out. That was a great song on a great album. And Tokyo Ghoul, classic anime.
Look, Josh has been here with shout out to Brooklyn Podcast, and Josh has been here this whole time, and he's seen me with other guests, and I really have to say this was a surreal, awesome experience.
Man, I'm
just
glad
you know
to be
what
here.
you're doing, and this is so much fun. I really hope we can get you back here because
anytime,
I had so much fun. This is great. We talk all the nerd stuff, but thank you for coming on African Time, the podcast. I appreciate you so much. It's been a lot of good time, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You're amazing, man.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you for everything. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. This has been African Time, the podcast. I'm your host, Kwesi Folie. Please remember to link, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And I hope y'all enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And until then, peace.